Welcome to Senior Living Investments with Emily Bow. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce our distinguished guest today, Gene Trowbridge. Gene is the founding partner of Trowbridge LLP, where his legal practice focuses on the syndication of commercial and investment real estate, including both debt and equity structures. With an impressive track record, Gene has represented over 650 clients in this specialized area, with offerings ranging from the medium size of $3 million to individual offering existing $6 billion. His expertise extends to writing offering under Rule 506B and 506C of Regulation D. Furthermore, Gene is the author of It's a Whole New Business, a comprehensive guidebook on real estate syndication, serving as a valuable how-to manual for practitioners in the field. Welcome to the show, Gene.
Well, thank you, Emily. Happy to be here. I'm happy that you reached out to me. You know, I was a syndicator for 20 years. I was a syndicator in the area of self-storage. We built self-storage and we didn't run it. We didn't want to run it. We just built it and we sold it. So I think I built 32 projects in my days and raised all my money through the broker-dealer network, which means I didn't specifically have the clients. My clients were registered reps and they had the investors. And in the early 90s, the REIT industry started out. And what is a good thing about the REIT structure is that there's liquidity. And that's something in the old days, we were doing nothing but limited partnerships and there was no liquidity. So the stockbrokers decided that they would gravitate toward REITs and put their investors' money in REITs as opposed to limited partnerships. Pretty much killed my business. So at 43, I went to law school, Emily, and I graduated from law school and passed the bar when I was 45. And I did it only to become a securities attorney because that's what I knew. I wasn't going to do divorces and wills and estates. I was going to do securities work. And that's what I've been doing now for over 30 years, Emily.
Wow.
And just as you read, my business just specializes in private placements.
Okay. Do you also help with structuring funds?
Sure. I mean, the securities laws, it doesn't make any difference what product you're doing. I mean, I do businesses and I do real estate. That doesn't really make any difference. It's just how do you raise the money from individuals? That's what the securities law is all about.
Okay.
And you can raise it for a specific property, or you can raise it for a blind pool where you don't know anything about the properties, but you're going with the sponsor who has a good track record. And if they have the money, they'll go out and buy some good properties. Or fund of funds where you can raise money and put it into someone else's offerings. That's quite popular today, Emily, but it's only popular because there aren't very many transactions going on. There aren't very many sellers who want to sell their commercial property today. So people who want to make their money raising money through syndications are looking to raise money to put in other people's deals. We probably do a fund of funds. Well, we probably do 2 or 3 a month. 5 years ago, I didn't do one a year. And I don't think it's an extremely good thing to do, but some of my clients do it because they just have investors who want to invest and they can't find the right property. I'll tell you, Emily, the most successful fund of funds clients I ever worked with, they raised $5 million a year. Their minimum investment was $250,000. Everyone was accredited. And they went out and their goal was to invest in syndications where the minimum investment per investor was $1 million. So their clients didn't have $1 million, but their fund did. So they would go out every year and invest in 5 funds where the minimum investment was $1 million. So you can imagine those are pretty large funds with large, successful, profitable sponsors. And they did very well on that, and they retired. They're not doing that anymore, but for about 10 years, it was a very successful plan for them. One of the problems about a fund is, why can't your investors just invest in that fund themselves? If Gene Trowbridge is doing Barstow mini storage, why can't the investors just invest with Gene? Why would they want to go through your fund and invest with you? Because you're not running anything. You're not responsible for the property. You're not really doing anything. So I often wonder why. And I think the reason is that someone like you, if you were doing a fund, would go out and find a good sponsor and a good product. And maybe your investors don't have time to do that. But there's really nothing that would stop an investor from investing straight on into those funds in the first place.
But on the other hand, I feel like most of the passive investors, they do not have the expertise or even the resource to thoroughly vet an operator. If I were a fund manager, they would probably trust me because they have known me for a while, but then they don't know any operator. So they are putting their trust on me as a fund manager.
That's certainly one of the reasons, isn't it? That would be very good.
With your extensive experience as a real estate investor, syndicator, and plus attorney, how do you recommend in terms of vetting an operator?
This is good for passive investors to hear this. It's also good for the sponsors to hear it, because I think the sponsors need to know the answers to these questions. The sponsors need to be able to respond. So when I have people call me and talk about this, I say the first thing you need to do is, let's say, Emily, you're the sponsor and you're looking for me to invest with you. The first thing I would say is, Emily, if I gave you the $50,000 you're asking for, what happens if something happens to you? And there's a couple interesting words there. I said, if I gave you the money. Now, I phrase that perfectly because that's what investors think they're doing. They think they're giving the money to Emily. Well, they're not giving the money to Emily. Emily has the money and buys a property with it. She doesn't have the money at all, except for a short period of time. But in the investor's mind, they think you have their money. So that's important. But the other important thing is, if Emily, you're the only person who's the manager of your fund, and things happen to you so that you cannot continue in your business, you cannot perform your duties, that's a real risk for the investors. And we're not just talking about dying. I mean, we've just come through COVID, when people got sick for months at a time. Some people died. People get divorced, and that's a lawsuit happening, and they file bankruptcy, and there's another lawsuit that happens. There are all sorts of things that can happen. And if there's just one person who's the sponsor, I believe the investor's money is at risk. Our firm won't do syndication paperwork required if Emily comes to us and says, well, I'm going to be the only sponsor. We're going to send you to some other attorney because we just don't think it's right. We don't want to do it. And so what's the background of that question? Well, when I ask Emily who the other person is, and Emily gives me the answer, I'd like to see the agreement that Emily has with that other person. Typically, it's a manager, LLC, and there's an operating agreement between Emily and the other person, or two persons, or five persons, or what they are, whatever they are. And I'd like to see that agreement, and I'd like to see the section on authority so I know who's making the decisions today. And if it's Emily, that's fine. But if something happens to Emily, how is it set up for the next person to make the decisions? And you can go crazy and you can say, well, I want it to be 5 levels deep. Well, I don't necessarily think that's important, but I think we need to have at least 2 levels, because the bank, and as the landlord, there are documents that have to be signed periodically. And if the operating agreement of the manager says that Emily or Gene can sign the documents, one or the other, great. Now I know that business will continue and my money isn't at risk just because Emily is out of the office for 6 months. I had a client, Emily, who hit his head skiing in Park City and was in traction 1 year. in the hospital for the first 6 months upside down. And who's going to run the business? Luckily, that client followed our advice, and there actually were two people in the company other than that client who had the authority to sign and draft checks and handle the money and make decisions. That's pretty important.
That's very good advice.
So that's the question is there continuity, and can you ask to see the authority structure in the continuity? That's pretty good.
Okay.
Next question I think you should ask, Emily, is that I would ask to you is, Emily, have you done this before? And Emily, we all have had to say, no, I haven't done it before. At the beginning, we've all had to say that. Oh, I haven't done it before, but this is my background. This is what I've done with commercial real estate. This is my training. This is my schooling. I've invested on my own. Whatever story you can tell that will convince the investor that you know what you're doing and let's get that first deal done so you don't have to answer the question no anymore. And so that was real important to me to get that first deal done. So it wasn't a very big deal. It was a deal, and it was a first deal, and I managed 5 people's money, and we bought an apartment building, and I was a syndicator. Good. So after about a quarter of that, I can say, yes, I planned, we bought a building, we run the building, we send out a check, we're in the business. So I think that's important. When you ask someone, have they done this before, and they say yes, I wouldn't be bashful to ask them for a biography, a listing of the deals they've done. What I'd like to see in that list, I'm visualizing some columns here, Emily. I'd like to see the name of the deal, how much did they raise, when did they raise it, and what's the status today? Well, it might have closed, and they might have sold it. They might still be operating it, and it might have closed. Well, when did it close? Okay. And you could get very detailed about that. I've seen some track record reports that talk about, we set out to raise 10 million. We only raised 8. We bought a property for so much money. And after 6 years, we sold it for more. Here's how much more. And our investors' return was X. If I'm a sponsor, I've got that document. That's my advertising. The second question I'm going to get asked, have you done it before? Why wouldn't I have a track record history printed out, ready to give you? It makes you wonder. It makes you wonder why they don't have something like that. Doesn't it?
Yes, but when we run into cases, the operator may be a con artist. They just fake all those documents. Then how can we prove its validity?
And I guess it's up to you to drive by that address. Okay, is there really a property there? I do that if you hired me to do the paperwork on one of your syndications, one of the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to Google the address that you tell me and see, is there a building there? Is it wrong? What does it look like? And that's important to me. And quite honestly, I typically Google the business address of the client. Okay, is it a P.O. box? Which is fine. My law firm has a P.O. box because we're all virtual all over the country. But mainly we have a P.O. box in College Station, Texas, even though I'm in California, because our office manager is in Texas. So that's okay, but at least I know it's there. And sometimes the address comes up to be someone's house. I'm not necessarily looking to see what your house is and where you live and everything. I just want to see that the information you've given me is right, is correct. You're not trying to hide something.
Okay.
So that's important. The third question is, are you going to invest in this deal? Are you going to have skin in the game? And in my early days, I used to think that all that meant was that I was going to invest some money. And if everyone else was investing 50, maybe I'd have to invest 25, or maybe I'd have to invest 50. And I have a lot of clients who are the biggest investors in every one of their deals because they have some money and they use that as a marketing tool. And that's where the money is going to be made. The limited partners make some money, so they invest there. That's fine. But if you're raising money, $100,000 as a minimum in every deal, and you're doing 12, 13 deals a year, you better have a lot of money if you're going to invest 100,000 yourself in every deal. So that doesn't make sense. It's more of a marketing question. There's no legal requirement to have anything in the deal. It's just simply marketing and what will the investors accept. And I said, I used to think the whole issue was how much cash are they investing? But that's not the case, because now every manager, every sponsor is going to sign on the mortgage. And mortgages today, they say they're non-recourse, but there are always carve-outs in the mortgage. So there's extra risk sponsor takes when they sign on the mortgage. So that would be good to know. Yes, Gene, I'm investing $50,000 and I'm signing on a mortgage that has carve-outs about environmental and waste and whatever. Oh, okay, that's cool. And then the last question I think an investor, a passive investor, should ask is, Emily, I'm 76 years old. What if I needed my money out of the deal? What if my family needed? How would that work? How would my liquidity work? And Emily needs to be able to say to me that she's going to have an operating agreement that's going to have extensive language on liquidity. There's voluntary liquidity. I'd like to give my units to my kids. There's involuntary liquidity. I just died. Where do the units go? How is that handled? Or I'm getting divorced, or I've been sued, and I've been sued for something that doesn't have anything to do with this. I'm just an investor in your deal, and I've been sued, but they want to attack all of my assets. Well, you want to get me out of there as badly as I want to get out of there, and you need to be able to work with the court to get those assets taken care of. So continuity for the sponsor, track record for the sponsor. Is the sponsor investing right alongside of the investors? And what will the documents say about liquidity for the investor? And so investor might very well take the document to another professional and have them look at the liquidity section. Because we have a section on voluntary liquidity. We have a section on involuntary liquidity.
In this case, liquidity, can I also define the situation being, say, if I invest 100K, but if I were get into a bad accident, I really need to get the 100K out so to pay for my medical bill.
That would be voluntary liquidity.
Okay.
There's a rule about that. Generally, what we like to write is that I would call you as a sponsor, tell you I want to sell, and you tell all the investors that Gene has some units to sell, and an investor can buy all of them. They can buy part of them. Multiple investors can close me out. That's fine. Or if no one wants to buy, manager can buy, company can buy, or I go out on the street and try to sell it myself. Generally, we want to keep the shares in the company. It would be best if the existing investors bought it out, because the existing investors, they know how things are working. And if I bring in a totally third party, how do you know he's not a jerk, right? Interesting. We haven't said one thing about the property, have we?
No.
Property. I'm not worried about the property at this point. I'm worried about who the sponsor is, because I'm of the opinion over the years that the sponsor is of equal importance to the property. And then if it's a property you're going to buy in directly, there's going to be a property package with explanation, rating statement, expenses, maybe some history. That's written down. And the question that an investor should have is, how am I going to verify that? Well, it's going to take some work. Be sophisticated investors, Emily. You're supposed to be able to read a profit and loss statement. You're supposed to be able to read the diagram of the property. I was working with a man today who's going to buy a large parcel of land and sell and divide it into 8 segments, 3 that are going to be sold to different developers for low-income housing, and 5 are going to be sold for commercial. Well, there's a lot to look at there. And I had to study that pretty carefully so I could even write the PPM to tell the story. Now, if I was an investor, I don't know if I would do more or less, but I would have to do research, not just take their word for it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's also including the underwriting as well. I mean, talking about the operator piece. But then on the other hand, I do see memorandum, they tend to get good numbers there, and but it may not actually reflect the market or being too like aggressive. So
Look at the assumptions. I mean, that's why this is a risky business. The people who are accredited, their net worth or their income, expected to have the knowledge to figure this out for themselves. And they aren't even expected to be protected by the government. You're accredited, you're just not protected. Just go ahead and figure it out yourself. But if you're not accredited, you're a sophisticated investor, the sponsor is supposed to research you to see if you, your own education, your own business experience, or the advisors that you sit with, be able to read the document and understand what's going on and understand the risk. And that's one thing I see in the marketplace that I'm not thrilled with. I know a lot of people who have done a lot of multifamily syndication over the years. As the multifamily cap rates went down and the deals didn't look quite so good, boy, all of a sudden they're telling everyone they're the most successful home park manager in the world. And there's a whole different world in managing a mobile home park, which I had done when I started out. I hated it. Then there is apartments. I didn't like apartments either because too management intensive. I like self-storage because I'd have 600 units and only one toilet to take care of. It was just perfect. And hopefully no one was sleeping in them. That isn't always the case, but that was what we were. So I say investors should be sophisticated. Well, I worry about the sponsors jumping from one product type to another product type. Are they sophisticated? And I think it actually goes, let's say you're staying in a product type, but this year you're doing Texas and you've done 15 deals in Fort Worth. Now you're going to do a deal in Charlotte, North Carolina. Well, what do you know about Charlotte, North Carolina? Yeah. What makes you an expert to take my money and go into Charlotte? So I think that's something you have to look at.
But then I would say there's also another perspective of diversification, right? And
Well,
maybe
right. So what I would do is I would hope that if you're going to go from Dallas to Charlotte, that the second person in your manager group is an experienced Charlotte multifamily person. And you can look at that and say, well, it's great to diversify. I believe in that. I believe two properties in an offering is better than one. Because if you buy one and it goes bad, you've lost everything. If you buy two and one goes bad, you still have something. So diversification sells. Investors that's what a mutual fund is, right? Investors like mutual funds, like a lot of stocks. Okay.
Next question for you would be, how can one raise capital? I think for most of the individuals, if they don't have substantial experiences, and for them bringing capital to a commercial real estate deal can be a very good entry point. But then most of the people, they actually don't aware of how to raise capital legally. So walk us through this.
Sure, I can talk about that. I get a lot of homework calls where people call me and just want to talk about stuff. And some of my favorite calls are the people who call and say, Gene, I'm a passive investor in 20 deals, and I've been able to retire. Now I want to be a sponsor. My first question is, why? Don't you just stay invested in your passive deals? It's worked for you. Why do you want to be a sponsor? Yes, you can make more money being a sponsor, but you can take more risks, and it's a job. Boy, it's a full-time job. Not just a real estate job, but it's a people job. You have to manage your 60, 70 investors in every deal. And over 4 or 5 years, people's lives change, their goals change, and you have their money. So they're going to want to talk to you. So that's a challenge. But raising money takes you right into the world of what is a security. And one of the questions I get is, Gene, I want to raise money from 10 people that I know, and I'm going to manage it. And I don't want it to be a syndication. That's a bad question, because a syndication is 2 or more people combining to do some business venture, period. And that's not the issue. The issue is it a security? It's flat syndication. There's no regulation on syndication. The
Mhm.
regulation applies is if your syndication rises to the level of a security, which is where there's an investment of money by investors, common company, common enterprise, an expectation of profit, the results of a promoter, the results of Emily. You're going to raise money from 5 people and put it inside one LLC. You've told them that your projection is there's a possibility increase in value, and you're going to make it happen. That's a security. So now that we're in the securities world, then we have their sets of rules. And a lot of people on your podcast are probably real estate people. And
Mhm.
they say, well, I've been a broker for 20 years. I don't care. Being a real estate broker has nothing to do with the securities laws. It's a totally different game. And most of the time you're a broker, you're selling a property to one person anyhow, or one LLC. But in the syndication world, you're raising money from multiple people to do a particular project where they're expecting money and you're going to manage it. So once again, they're going to give you their money and you're in charge of it. So that gives you regulations. Now, when all this came through, the first set of regulations set the world up for stock market and public offerings. And always has been an ability to raise money and not go into the public market. And it was always called a private placement. That's all fine, but that really took off in 1981. And Regulation D was passed by Congress and said, here's a structure where you can do private placements and raise money from people without going to Wall Street, without going to the public market and all the scrutiny there is in public offerings. And I was raising money then when Regulation D came out. And it solved a lot of things. The first thing it solved, it defined what an accredited investor was. Without getting into that, accredited investor is someone that the government doesn't needs protection. Funny, and we always laugh, all of us who are in the business laugh. I can step up to a crap table and throw the dice and lose every penny I have. There's no government protection. Okay? Go to the stock market and play all the stocks and margins, calls, and everything. There's no government protection. But in a private placement, if you're accredited, we're not going to protect you at all. But if you're not accredited, we're going to protect you. And those would be the sophisticated investors. Regulation D defined what an accredited investor was and said that how you can do deals is you can raise an unlimited amount of money, have an unlimited number of accredited investors, have 35 sophisticated investors who are not accredited but are smart enough to know what's going on. Can't advertise. You can only raise money from people you knew. There's no social media advertising. There's no newspaper and radio advertising. And that was important. That 1981, that law is still today. And there have been a few changes, but basically it's the same law. And I'll tell you what's interesting. At the end of the year, every year, the SEC publishes a report that happened during the previous 12 months. And the report that was published in December said that private placements is $2.7 trillion in the previous 12 months. That's twice the amount of money raised on Wall Street in new offerings that they would call IPOs. The amount of money. So this is where the money's raised in the country. And what does it do? It funds real estate. Maybe only 25% of that is real estate, but it funds businesses. People who want to start businesses, they get money from their family, they go to the bank and borrow what they can, but then they go to the public marketplace to find the rest of the money that they need to their business. And small businesses, defined as less than 500 employees, almost all of their equity capital from the private placement market. So it's very, very huge market. And it's been going along, that rule, Reg D, is where all the money's raised. And in Reg D, as you know, Emily, there's 506B, 506C. Well, there's always been 506. From 81 to 2012, it was just simply 506 with the same rules. 5 sophisticated, unlimited accredited, unlimited dollar amount, and no advertising. Congress and the SEC thought there were a whole bunch of people out there who were accredited, were not hearing about opportunities because no one could advertise. And that applied to me. When I was raising money, all I could do is go to the stockbrokers, already had clients. The only people who could invest with me because the stockbrokers couldn't go out and advertise about my deal. They could only deal with their financial planning clients. So we said, let's open that up. And so they came around with 506C. The magic in 506C is that you can advertise investors and take investors you don't know, as long as everyone is accredited. And that's the requirement. Limited accredited, unlimited dollar amount, advertise any way you want, anything you can think of is advertising. And everyone, because you don't know them, there has to be a third-party verification to show that they're accredited. But before I get off of that, that has not been popular. The 2.7 trillion, 90% of that money is raised in 506B. During the same 12-month period, only 161 billion raised in 506C, and 5%. It just hasn't done it. Most of my clients don't even do 506C. They have so many investors now that they know that they just deal with their existing investors and referrals and things like that aren't advertising.
Okay. So if I were to invest in the 506B, and then I have my friends, they saw me investing in a deal, they also want to invest with me into 506B. Is it allowed?
Well, let's say I'm the sponsor and you've invested, and now Aunt Mary wants to invest. Well, you could introduce Aunt Mary to me, and I'd have to find out, is she accredited or is she sophisticated? But I didn't advertise to get Aunt Mary. So, and if I didn't advertise to Aunt Mary and she's at least sophisticated, I could sell her interests in our fund and she could come in and invest with us.
Okay.
And she would invest directly with us, not through you, not like a funds, but she would invest directly with me. And I would go through the vetting process, the verification process of her before she invests.
Okay.
If you wanted to get 20 people you know to invest in my deal, and you came to me and said, Gene, I want to form my own LLC, and I want 20 people to invest in my own LLC, I'll be the manager, and the decision I'm going to make is my LLC is going to invest with you. We'd call that a fund of funds. And that happens. That's done. We have a couple issues there. If my offering is 506C, all of your people have to be accredited. And if mine is 506B, we can only take 35 investors. So if you have 20 and they're all sophisticated, there's 20. Now I can only take 15. I may have 20 already myself, and I can't go over a total of 35. So that's kind of a challenge.
And what's the proof of someone being sophisticated investor?
Well, there's no proof. The SEC has a definition that the person alone through their education and their business experience or with the help of their advisors can understand the deal. Well, we prove it through the subscription agreement through what's called the offeree questionnaire. We'd say, well, Emily, what have you invested in? What's your education? What's your job? And you would fill that out, and then I would look at it and decide that, yes, this looks like someone who can make a decision, and I would either accept you or turn you down. Okay. Now, if you're accredited, what interesting thing, you're accredited, we don't assume that you know anything. If you have enough money, it's not our problem. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? We just assume that accredited investor is sophisticated.
we touch upon the differences between 506C and 506B. And I also hear that more than 90% of the capital raised through private placement is from 506B rather than 506C.
Yes. I think the SEC said through the Form D that we file and give them history that on average there's less than 5 sophisticated investors in every deal. Even in 506B, everyone's accredited, but that's another story. When Reg D was formed, the definition of accredited investor, $1 million net worth and $200,000 as a taxpayer, the percentage of households in the United States that were accredited was less than 2%. Less than 2%. So less than 2% of the households didn't need the government's protection. Now, today, they've never changed those dollar amounts, and assets have gone up in value. People's salaries have gone up in value. And now we're at 18% of the households in the United States are accredited. And actually, that took a big dip in 2008 when Dodd-Frank took the value of your principal residence out of your formula for your net worth, that we lost about 1/3 of the accredited investors at that time. But today we're at 18%. And the projection in the report that the SEC put out in December is if we don't do something and inflation keeps on going, by 2032, 30% of the country will be accredited. And they said that's not where we want to be. So there's discussions, and there's been discussions for the last 10 years on this. Should we apply inflation to the $1 million? And the report this year was, well, if we did do that, and they're not saying they're going to, if we did do that, then the net worth requirement would be about $3 million. The income for an individual taxpayer would be $600. For married filing jointly, it would be $900. But even if we did that, we'd only take the number of accredited households down to about 12%.
Wow.
And they're not, we lose about 1/3 of them, but they're not sure that that's enough. But one proposal that I thought had quite a bit of sense, going back to Dodd-Frank, when they took your personal residence out of your formula for $1 million so that you wouldn't be risking, the value of your house. They're thinking about doing the same thing with retirement funds. If we just said retirement funds don't count toward your net worth for the definition of being accredited, would that cut the number? And yes, it would cut the number quite a bit. And I think about that. I thought that the decision to take the value of your primary residence out was good, because we live out here in California. There are people that paid $100,000 for a house down in Laguna Beach, and it's now worth $3 million. They don't owe a penny, and they live on Social Security. And caregivers come to their house every day to do their laundry. Those people need protection. So that was a smart move. Now, maybe it would be a smart move to take your retirement funds out of that definition, because so many people have been contributing to their 401ks and IRAs for 20, 30 years. They have a lot of money in there, but do we want to risk that? Do we want people to risk that? Or do we just want people who the $1 million means, not counting my house and not counting my retirement, I've made investments. So they're real investors, right? That might be a good idea. I don't know, but nothing's going to happen. Emily, the process on that is the government writes a report and sends it out and gets some comments. And then they go to Congress and they talk about what they're going to do. The SEC in Congress talks about something and they come up with the proposed regulation. They send the proposed regulation out to the public for maybe 90 days of comments. They take the comments in, they think about it, and then eventually they issue the final ruling. But as we're talking, we're in an election year. By November, with an election, the SEC board might be totally different. Congress might be totally different. So are they going to make some drastic changes right now when these people are all when you're on your last term in office, you're a short timer or something like that? Are they going to let people who might be going out of office, and maybe not, maybe they're not going out of office, but are they going to let people make those decisions? And I don't know. The betting money is that there won't be any changes at all in 2024.
Okay. Okay. Well, one thing my friend would ask would be why the rich getting richer and poor getting poor. And for them, they do feel that because the accredited investor, the rich people, they are exposed to more opportunity that they can invest their money in.
Sure.
But then, yeah, for the poor, they may not have the network. Like in real estate, we all say that network is your net worth. So they even don't have the network to know the who. They also do not know the 506B offering that is out there. So they have money in the bank, but it's just collecting the dust. Like, what's your view on this?
My view on that is, by definition, you can't advertise a 506B. So no one will ever know. The people who would love to invest in them will never hear about it. And the sponsors who would love to get their money will never be able to tell them about it. And there at the most could only be 35 people in every deal. I mean, we have, in the introduction, we said that our median is about $3 million. So let's say you're raising $3 million at 25,000. Well, even at $100,000 a time, that's 30 investors, right? You go to 50,000 a time, that's 60 investors. Well, if you drop it to 25, what is it, 120 investors? How many? And you can only take 35 sophisticated. You still have to raise most of your money through accredited investors. That's the way that goes. And I was at an SEC conference in March, Emily, and I asked the SEC person if they go ahead and raise the accredited investor limits and cut it down to maybe 10% of the households, will they increase the number of sophisticated investors you can have? Because if they don't, it's going to be difficult to raise the same amount of money next year that you're raising this year, because you've just lost a third of your audience and you're not replacing it with anyone. Or maybe your $100,000 minimum investment is now 150, which doesn't help the sophisticated people in your example. They're not going to be able to invest. Even if 25,000 goes to 50, a lot of people won't be able to invest. So, but there are other things. See, the private placement world is a risky place, designed for accredited investors. You want to invest somewhere else, buy Apple stock, buy Johnson & Johnson, buy Tesla. There are plenty of other places. Put your money in CDs. There are plenty of places that you can make money. It's just that the returns aren't what some of the returns are, because there's no risk involved.
Yeah, the higher the risk, the higher the return. So yeah.
And potentially, a couple of years ago, the federal government was saying about retirement funds that they wanted all retirement funds to be invested in federally insured things. Okay, what do they pay? 2-3%. And wouldn't it be great if the federal government got a hold of the $68 trillion in retirement funds, all in their own accounts? I don't think that'd be a good idea.
Going back to raising capital, say, Gene, you are the sponsor. I say, okay, I want to bring value to you by raising capital for your deal. Then what's the legal way for me to get paid?
Form your own LLC, bring your own investors into your own LLC, and have them pay you. Then your LLC invests as one investor in my fund. See, your security is your own fund. You're selling securities in your own LLC, and you can do that without a broker's license. It's for sale by owner in the securities world. You're doing that. And then you take your entity and write one check into my entity. And at the end of the year, I'll write one check back to you for all of your distributions, and I'll give you one K1. You take your check, divide it. You take the K1 and divide it. It's your security. You asked me, what's the legal way to get paid? And I just gave you only legal way to get paid. Now, is that the way it's being done on the streets? We know that. We talked about that. We talked about you putting together a group of people and coming to me and said, Gene, I'll bring in $1 million if you make me a 1% general partner or member of the manager and give me $25,000. In the securities world, that's illegal because you're getting paid for that group that you bring in. And the group you bring in is a security. And the only way you can get paid for selling securities is to have a securities license. You would be acting as an unregistered broker-dealer. And so if things went bad and someone complained, they'd come after you, and that wouldn't be so good. But the most scary part of it, Emily, is let's say you brought $1 million into my deal, and my deal went bad. Investors, you think they're going to go after me? You are liable. They can go after you for a theory called rescission. They can go after you and said, you were acting as an unlicensed broker-dealer. You took our $1 million, it's gone. We want you to give us our $1 million back. And all you ever got paid was 1% of some little silly thing that didn't go anywhere, and $25,000. See, the people that are doing that, they don't know the risk they're taking. And so in my best legal advice, don't do that. Form your LLC and let your people pay you directly, and then you put it in someone else's deal. Now, that necessarily means there's more load on the deal than if we directly if you went right into my deal. I'm taking a 1% acquisition fee. You're putting together your group, you're investing with me. Are you taking a 1% acquisition fee? Because when you put your money in, I'm taking 1%. Now you're taking 1%. So now only 98% is actually working. So that compounds the cost to your investors. But Emily, as you said, maybe your investors would never know about the deal. Maybe my offering has a $500,000 minimum investment, and you can bring 500 or $1 million in. Good. Your investors can't get in my deal. They wouldn't know about it. They can't get in it. They don't know me, so they'll never make it. So there are some reasons why they might want to invest with you, Emily.
Say if I form my LLC and they put the money in my fund, but if your deal goes south, they can still go after me, but then they would just go after my company, my LLC, right? So it's not like I'm losing everything.
You would lose everything because they'd go after you as acting as an unregistered broker-dealer, and that's not protected by your LLC. The Securities Commission will go after you individually.
But then in the case that if I go with your legal advice, I form my LLC.
Yeah, you form your LLC and you bring it in and you don't ask to get paid. That's fine.
Okay.
Now, let's say you don't ask to get paid, so you've done everything right and my deal goes bad. They can still come after you, but now since you've done everything right, you're going to be protected by your LLC.
Okay. Then what's the benefit of me even raising money through my LLC to put into your deal if I cannot get paid?
They'll pay you an acquisition fee. They'll pay you an asset management fee every month or every quarter. They may pay you a fee if there's a refinance. Maybe they'll pay you part of that. I don't know what the fees are, but I do quite a few fund to funds right now, and everyone the Emilys in my world get paid. It is a double cost. Not double, but it's an extra cost. But there might be so much upside in the other deal, it doesn't make any difference. And once again, you're right. The people wouldn't get in there if you didn't give them a chance, Emily.
Correct. Okay, say the other scenario, it's a much smaller deal. I know someone who has a property, they need money, and I bring another one who has the capital into the deal. Then I make something called a connector fee. Is it legal?
Normally, if it's a security transaction, it's illegal.
Okay.
So we have to go back to the definition, is a security. Your people are investing in a deal that I'm running. You just bring one party in. I'm running it. They're my investor. That's a security. It's an investment of money in this common deal with an expectation of profit through the results of me. That's a security. If you sold that and got paid, you'd be acting as an unregistered broker-dealer. So the way to do that is not make it a security. if you bring in a high-powered person to work with me, we could do, I'm almost afraid to use this word, we could do a joint venture that is not a security. It's still a syndication. It's a joint venture, but we're going to vote on everything 50-50. He may have 90% of the money in and I may have 10, but the votes are 50-50. Everyone will say, I'm not in charge of him. And with his 90%, he's not in charge of me. So you could do that. You could do a deal where it's not a security. Typically, it's the last prong through the efforts of others. Because even what I just said, it would be an investment of money in a common joint venture with an expectation of profit. Well, those three things are almost always present. What makes it a security is that either I'm going to be in charge or no one's going to be in charge. We're going to vote unanimously on every major decision. And that's okay with 2 people, maybe 3, but that's not going to work with 15 people. Legal advice on that, if you're planning to try to outsmart them, get some good legal advice.
Yes. Yeah, that's why I want to bring you to the show, because what you just shared is going to really provide tremendous value to the audiences. And they may just in the blank, they even do not know they are doing X, Y, and Z is illegal. And I'm truly hoping that with this show, they will actually know what they should do when they are in the capital raising game.
That's why I do this. I'm on a lot of podcasts, and I'm pleased to be on yours, Emily. And I think we are providing, in my opinion, we're providing good advice. Of course, it's my advice. I think it's good advice.
So I know that you're a co-host of the podcast, Hey, Am I Adopted, with your daughter, Emily Trowbridge. And could you tell us a little bit more about your show and the type of guests that you like to bring to your show?
I didn't know you were going to ask me that, but I know we talked about that yesterday. Yes, my family of 4, myself, my wife, and my 2 daughters, are all adopted. There are a lot of different stories in that, and we're adopted different ways. And we've had different outcomes. One of my daughters is gone at the age of 31 through substance abuse, which is a very typical problem with adoptees. And so Emily and Amy and I are doing this podcast. In fact, just yesterday we recorded our 14th episode, and it's out there wherever you find your podcast, Apple or Spotify. I listen to mine when I run on my Spotify, and it's just simply called, Hey, Am I Adopted? And that came to us because one day, even though Kay and I made it a point to make sure both of the girls always knew they were adopted, I think Emily was being bullied while she was playing in the neighborhood. And so she ran in the house and she screamed at us, Hey, am I adopted? Yes, you are. You're adopted. That's what I thought. She ran out to play. So that was the name of it. So we have episodes. Like I said, the 4 of us have different stories. The 3 of us can tell our stories, and we can tell Amy's story. And we've talked about, finding our parents, do our belong, loss and abandonment, and whatever it is, being adopted. It's surprising. My Emily wanted to do this very badly, and my Emily comes up with a lot of ideas. She's 42, and she's had a lot of ideas in her life, and I thought if I ignored it, it would go away. But after 2 years, this didn't go away. So we started filming and working on it in January, and I have learned so much about myself, certainly a lot about her. And one of the stated reasons she wanted to do this is she and I work together when we go to conferences. We go together. We spend a lot of time together. What she wanted a history. She wanted a history of my life and her mom's life and her life with us. And she thought it would be great to have it a verbal history. It's not a audio podcast. It's just verbal. So that's what we're doing. Anyone listening who'd like to tell their story about being adopted, boy, and when you start talking to guests, everyone's story is kind of the same. Everyone is really about the same. Some have better endings than others, and some are in the middle, and it hasn't worked out as well as they thought, and we hope it'll be better. But I see myself in all my guests. It's very, very interesting. So if you want to be a guest, go to info@Hey, Am I Adopted?
Thank you.
Second, and thanks for doing that. That means a lot to me, Emily.
What daily habit has contributed the most to your success?
Well, I work a lot. Okay, and if I go back to that, I'm an adopted only child, just shoot me. I have so many weird things in my mind, but one of the things that's always worked for me is working hard and being alone. I like to be alone. I like my quiet time. I like to work alone. And so that's a daily habit. I get up at 6 every morning. We're out in California, so everything's on the East Coast. You kind of got to get up and work when they work. And I'm through at about 3 o'clock. My day is finished. I'll probably take a nap, which is okay when you're 76 to take a nap, right? The kids are grown and all that. And then come downstairs and spend the evening with my wife.
Lovely.
And the book that I've read,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to take this back to the adoption, is a book called The Primal Wound. Primal Wound. And it's an older book now. I think I read it the first time when Amy died about 15 years ago. I was searching for answers. Why? And this lady's theory is after a baby grows in mommy's tummy for 9 months and is taken out and handed to some stranger, that's trauma. That's a wound. And for some of the people we've talked to on the show, and even the three of us, that's affected us differently. My oldest daughter, who's gone, never got over that. Always felt abandoned. Always felt that she didn't belong with us. And the people she belonged with never came to find her. So it was a terrible life. And so she coped with it with drugs and alcohol. And finally, that's a downer on this. But on the other side of the coin, I love the real estate business. I've been in the real estate business since 1972. It's the only thing I've ever done. Now I'm in the securities business, and we do things other than real estate. Last year, we helped someone buy a hockey team, a professional hockey team. And right now I'm working on an offering where the company is going to manufacture and get patents on a brand new mixer for pharmaceuticals. So it's all different. Wherever money is needed to be raised, and you can't get it from your parents in the bank, you got to go to the public, and welcome to the securities world.
I see. So the audience doesn't have to do real estate to come to you. As long as they need to raise money for anything, for their business, they can come to you.
Absolutely. And I know people, Emily, who have raised money simply to be a sponsor. They said, before I become a sponsor, I want 5 people in my manager LLC, and I want to raise $1 million. So they went out and found 5 people who would invest $200,000 each into the sponsor entity. And now just think what they can do. They can go out and bid on properties. They can pay earnest money deposits. They can pay due diligence. But that was a business. The business of being a sponsor is a business. So they wanted to syndicate that business before they went out and syndicated real estate.
Okay. So thank you so much, Gene. And I know that if audience wants to get in touch with you, they will probably be able to find you from the information that you have already shown on your background, right? The phone number is 949-570-1507. What the other way that the audience can get in touch with you?
I'd like to see them go, if they want a consultation with me, to go to my company website, which is T for Trowbridge, N for Nay, LLP, TNLLP.com. And if they go to our website, one of the things they can do is they can download the PDF of my book. I've written a book called
It's a Whole New Business.
It's on the website, and there's QR code there, and you can click on the QR code and you will get a free PDF of the book. You can go to Amazon and buy it if you want, or I narrated it earlier this year, and so there's an
audiobook version.
There's also a Kindle version anywhere on Amazon, but it's cheapest if you just want to read it to go to my website and get a free PDF. Okay.
Love it. Thank you. Thank you so much, Jing. I really appreciate that you share your knowledge and expertise with our audience today. And thank you for your time.
You're welcome, Emily. Thank you.